Republican senator from the great state of South Carolina, currently the president of the Heritage Foundation. His new book is called Falling in Love with America Again. Please welcome back to the program, Jim DeMint. Thank you so much for joining us again. The book is called Falling in Love with America Again. Sir, I have to ask, how can we win you back? What can we do? How did you fall out of love with us? Do you feel like we took you for granted? Do you feel like what was it that made you feel like the magic was gone?
Well, John, you know we're all blessed to be Americans, and a lot of us are worried we might be going in the wrong direction. I mean, you've got a lot of young folks here today, but large majority of young Americans say they no longer think the American dream is attainable. And most of them will live will have less opportunity in their lives than their parents did. That's the first time in history. And what I'm trying to do here is just remind Americans that we can change that course, but we have to do it ourselves. And it's when we remember that we're a ground-up country rather than a top-down. It's not political, it's not partisan, but we were actually built as a nation different than any other nation because we were very decentralized, individuals, communities working together, what we call little platoons. And it's working all across America today. So I've been...
Little platoons?
Little platoons. You like that word?
Now, we've always had, what you're saying is we need more, I guess, community organizers.
We talk about a lot of community organizers, people who solve problems, create new schools, more choices, a lot of people helping to solve health care at the local level. States like North Dakota opening their energy, creating a lot of jobs. We can just see a lot better solutions. So I've been on the inside, as you know, of Congress. I've been out, I lived most of my life out of politics, and the solutions are out of Washington. So I just feel like politics is dividing the country. When I talk to people, they're not nearly as divided about some common sense ideas. So I'm just optimistic if people start voting for themselves rather than some concept of what government might do.
But government has, you know, if you also poll people, they would say, I think 65%, 70% say government has a role to play in helping those in poverty.
Yeah.
So shouldn't we focus on, the difficulty that I have is at times in that divide of those who feel government has less of a role to play, rather than reforming, they abdicate responsibility and obstruct. And so what they do is they cause the function of government to cease. And by doing that, hurt a tremendous amount of people without reforming a system that desperately needs smart reform and not obstruction.
You're right. I mean, our hearts, I think, are in the same place. But if you look at
they're
really...
not.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I mean, chest-wise, yes. Biologically, they are.
I know I'm offended.
But didn't the Heritage Foundation, wasn't it your foundation that promoted this idea of shutting down the government?
No, we didn't.
I'm sorry.
We thought
I thought you promoted that.
No, we didn't. We did not think we should proceed with the implementation of Obamacare.
I see.
It was not ready for prime time. We didn't think it should be funded, and that would delay it.
I see.
And so, obviously, some folks had different opinions about that. But we were talking about something important.
Yes.
And here, there should be a safety net for citizens who are in trouble. The question is it best done at the federal level? Which, you know, we've spent trillions over 30 years working on poverty, and we've got more poverty than we did before.
Well, that's not, it depends on how you calculate it, I guess.
Well,
if you calculate in the benefits, we've reduced poverty from 25% to 16%.
Well, it depends on how you, what is really.
Well, you would, right.
But
you would calculate in
the example
benefits
that we give here, again, I'm not saying you eliminate the government, but there's so many examples around the country. You've got Step 13 in Denver, for instance. The people down and out, drug addicts, alcoholics, who they say can't get jobs, but they actually help them get off the drugs, get training, get a better job, and get their hand on the ladder of opportunity. And all around the country you go, and you're just, what we're trying to point out here, there's citizens, volunteer groups who are actually doing a better job helping people get their hand on that ladder.
But that exists, but they would be, from everything that I have heard from individuals in these locally based community charities and faith-based charities, they would be utterly overrun and overwhelmed if the government were to pull back its support from these safety net programs. I talk to guys that I know that run the Los Angeles Food Bank, and they tell me, you pull the government out of this, we're already at peak capacity.
Yeah.
Churches say that, local groups say that. Who is going to take care of all these people?
I'm not saying cold turkey. What we're saying is let's look at the things that don't work. And actually, welfare traps people into programs like Medicaid.
Right.
And if you get a job and start working your way out, you lose your benefits quicker.
There is certainly any means-tested program will have a gray area that I think you can incentivize.
Yeah,
I think there's no question.
We need more partnerships locally, but I think we both agree that we need safety nets for people, but we need a system that helps people get out of it and get their hands on a ladder of opportunity. We don't want people stuck in dependency their whole life. That's not what life's about.
Right.
Well, I'm not saying
but I think
anyone should be...
the problem here, I think, though, is there is a conflation between virtue and poverty on the right. That the right views poverty as a character flaw, when it is a situational, the phrase, there but for the grace of God go I.
Exactly. I mean,
but it's not how it is viewed. You see what we showed. They are demonized. They are ridiculed. If there is a class war, the poor are getting their butts kicked.
Yeah.
And I think that's unfortunate.
Well, I can prove to you, John. First of all, no, that what the federal government is doing is the bigger the government gets, the wider the income gap gets, the harder it is for people to get a hand on the ladder of opportunity, because all of these smaller units around the country are getting smothered out, whether it's through regulations or whatever. But I know big government...
Churches are getting smothered from charity through regulation?
They actually are. There's more liability. They can't carry it out the way they want. And a lot of the congregation will say, okay, that's what my taxes do.
Right.
But we know what works. And centralized planning does not work in any area. I'm not saying the federal government doesn't have a role to support the LA Food Bank.
Wait, when you say you know what works, you mean you know what works to alleviate poverty on a permanent level on a wide scale?
We can see the evidence of what is working. You're never going to wipe out poverty completely, but all of us, if we look at what's going on, and I give numerous of examples.
But it's anecdotal. Some of these are a church group got together and they saved guys that couldn't be saved other places. But I can find anecdotes of people through government programs in inner cities and in rural communities that have utilized government programs as a step up, and it has worked for them. So again, I think there's a myopia.
We're not talking about eliminating programs that work, but I've worked in inner cities, and I've worked in churches where we were trying to solve problems on the inner city level, get job training. And many times there's a federal program that won't work with you because it happens to be organized by the church in the inner city. But this is not an anti-government.
When you say they won't work because they work with the church, you mean if they give them money, they can't make them say a prayer?
Well, that kind of thing, yes.
Right.
But
you mean like constitutional?
This is not an anti-government book. What it is saying is that America was different than any other country from the beginning, and still is. And we're more about this ground-up phenomenon of individuals taking responsibility, working together, solving problems. And if you look at what's going on around the country, the people who are creating more choices of schools, primarily it benefits the poor. If you look at states like North Dakota that take the initiative, develop their own energy, it creates jobs and raises the income for the poor. So the thought here is, rather than having some mandate from Washington...
North Dakota is a great example. So let's talk about the free market there. You know, the most expensive place right now to rent a 3-bedroom apartment in the entire country?
North Dakota.
There you go.
Yeah.
And it's killing people. And they're living in trailers. Now, there is work there, but there is also a very Darwinian atmosphere that begins to occur. Now, this is a microcosm of the way this country was built. These safety nets didn't arise out of a power grab by progressives. They arose out of a need that was not being met by free market capitalism.
There is a role, particularly for local and state governments. The federal government may need to fill in. But John, again, we hurt people when we create these centralized plans that trap them in dependency.
I think that's too broad-based a comment. I think it takes value out of a lot of these programs. I think we hurt people when we view those programs as anathema to recovery and then obstruct and do not give any victory to the opposing party for risk of being seen as bipartisan, and do not allow reform to occur that needs to happen.
That's not happening with the reform.
Do you really think that this government is functioning properly and that it's not being sabotaged through obstruction?
It's not being sabotaged, but it is dysfunctional. But what you have now is you've got folks who want everything done from Washington, others who say that's not what's working. There's no reasonable compromise except the way we started as a country. It's a word called federalism that people don't use much anymore, but it means let the federal government do what it's supposed to do well, maybe what we can afford, and let the states and the people do what they can do better. We know the states and the people can run schools better than the federal government. We've got a number of examples where they're actually doing health care and getting health insurance to people better than the government. I'm not saying change everything overnight, but the more we try to do in Washington, the more we divide people. Particularly, we tell people how to live their life.
I just disagree with that. It's, you know, clean air, clean water, highways, Medicare. These are not divisive programs. These are programs that, because of externalities within capitalism, would not and could not be fixed by free market solutions, and weren't. And I think it's wrong to go into it with that assumption that it divides people when big government gets involved.
No, it's not.
Because
it
brings a mistrust.
It divides people when they force everyone into the same school when we all have different learning styles. And some are destined to failure. And we see in so many states when they expand the choices, like DC Scholarship, almost all the children who benefited from that were poor minority children. But that gets people like Juan Williams or James Carville, who are not conservatives, saying this is a good idea for our country. And
listen, there's no question that there are programs, pilot programs in many different areas that need to be extended and looked at, and government needs to become more agile, and its regulation needs to become sharper and leaner. But the message that I get, and I think you're being just slightly disingenuous if the suggestion hasn't been from the right to demonize government in all its forms and to create, to me, that's what's so divisive, is this idea somehow that health care for all is a divisive concept. It seems the most American of all concepts.
What is divisive, John? Health. I mean, I came to Congress, one of my priorities was, and
I think that was your mistake right there.
I know, it probably was my mistake.
I think going to Congress might have been the big...
I wouldn't be in this situation. But one of my goals was that every American would have access to a health plan they could afford and own and keep. Okay? But people want different plans. A young person might just want a high deductible plan that covers the basics. And you get my age, everything starts falling apart. You want a different kind of plan that covers.
With you there, brother.
But the one size fits all coming out of Washington.
But it's not one size. You know, to suggest that Obamacare is one size fits all is also not true. I mean, admittedly, there is now a standard of care that the insurers have to offer.
Right.
But like in anything, our automobiles are not allowed on the road unless they meet a whole booklet of regulatory standards. Regulation itself is not the enemy. What is the enemy is a process that cannot be reformed to become more agile because of the loggerheads that exist philosophically.
Yeah, you're right. We need more flexibility and choices. The problem with a one-size-fits-all, and we've used the analogy of a lot of folks here have never had to go buy an album or a CD where they buy 15 songs to get the two they want. They go on the internet, they buy what they want, and that's a new kind of freedom. But when you go back to kind of the CD for health care, a lot of young folks would just like to get a basic plan. A lot of that's off the table now.
So rather than repeal 50 times the Affordable Care Act, what is wrong with suggesting, okay, we've got this, I don't know, gold, bronze, silver, whatever they're doing that somehow ties it into the Olympics, whatever they're doing with programs, to suggest, let's do a carve-out, perhaps, for just catastrophic illness plan that we think would be good. But that is in no way the tone and effect of what's happening there.
Well, where I'm coming from, you had 75% of people in the country had health plans that they liked. There were people who couldn't buy health insurance because
And you had
pre-existing
40, 50 million people who didn't have anything.
Well, and about 20 or 30 of those had access and didn't buy it. We needed,
which is bankrupting the country because we're still paying for it.
We're paying for it one way or another, whether it's through subsidizing health insurance or not.
Let's pull it back this way then, because this is a larger discussion.
Yeah.
Is healthcare, can that be a free market economy? Is healthcare a slightly different economy than a free market one?
Most of it could work as a free market economy.
How do you comparison shop for healthcare?
Oh, you can very much compare it. I had a daughter in college, I got her a $5,000 deductible because she.
I don't mean for insurance. I mean for healthcare.
Okay.
Let's say I want to have a heart stent put in,
okay.
and I call 3 hospitals in the area, and I say, "How much does that cost?"
Yeah.
They will not tell you.
They will. I know for other services. I'll give you my son and his wife were having their first child.
Right.
He asked 3 hospitals, since he didn't have insurance and had to pay for it himself.
Right.
What would they give him for cash? And one hospital said the same as you would charge on a rate card, but the third one said, we'll give you half price if you pay for cash and you pay half of that up front. And if people were shopping for health care, and all the doctors would tell you this, if you go in and pay...
But people are dying. And to go in and say, will you get, you know what, I'm having a heart attack.
We're not talking
what will you give me for cash?
We're not talking about emergency services.
But that is part of it. You know, you can't separate a system that is utilized for all different contingencies. You can't separate it out and say, well, you can shop for maternity care, but you cannot shop for cancer care.
You can shop for a lot of it. You don't have to necessarily go and negotiate when you're having a heart attack.
But you're really going to go in with cancer and say, who's cheapest?
Well, no. People do that now as they get cancer. They call the Mayo Clinic. They're looking at places out of town, trying to find the best service.
They're just trying to get somebody to take them.
They're trying to get someone who's the best in the field to do it.
That's right.
And
That's right.
The consumerism doesn't mean you don't help people who need the help. But to say because some people need the help that everyone has to be under the same government plan, first of all, the federal government...
But everybody's not under the same plan. They're just meeting a certain amount of standard, yes?
But the federal government does not have the capability to manage our national health care system. And despite all the good intentions, we need is to make sure that there is a lot of decision-making going on. And you talk about adjusting it. It's built on a centralized model. We need to make sure everyone gets health insurance. But let's start with the best health care system in the world. Let's create more competition. Let people buy.
But who has the best? Where are you saying the best health care system?
We do. We have as this country.
Okay. I think that's not. Again.
Why do you think people from all over the world come here to get their health care?
I got bad news for you. People go from here all over the world to get other procedures done. Like, it goes both ways. I'm not suggesting.
Well, that's because the government won't approve things here.
There is also at play here a gauzy nostalgia that tends to color our view. You know, you talk when you were younger, your kids went to a small school, Catholic school, and they played a small school where they played soccer and baseball.
Yeah.
And you really liked it, and you got involved.
Yeah.
And then they went to a larger high school, and you didn't like that. And so that taught you that big is bad and small is good, if I'm reading this correctly.
We didn't say all big was bad, but the more distant it gets, the big cell phone companies, the big utility companies, and it's when you're not involved with
So
the
you
small
don't like Walmart? Is that... Because aren't economies of scale, don't they function? Isn't one of the only ways that you have bargaining power by collectivizing, by becoming a society and using the power of numbers to bargain efficiently in a market system?
Walmart's a good example. It's a huge company, but every store is localized to a degree. And so it's maybe a big local store.
I got news for you. They don't know if they're in Nevada or New Hampshire.
The merchandise
Here's what they know. It's $8 for sweatpants. And there's an Applebee's up the road.
Yeah.
They don't give a damn about that local community. And to go beyond that, because their wages are so low, Walmart is one of the largest consumers, their employees, of federal benefits like food stamps, like assistance.
But I can choose to go to Walmart, Target, a small store, large store. I can make that choice. So
Well,
if they don't serve
not once they've come into a town, that small store might not be there anymore.
if they don't serve my needs, I don't have to go there. But if the federal government does something, if they have Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac to do home mortgages, I mean, there's no choice of where to go. And if they fail us like they did in the big recession, the big housing bubble, they don't go
They're
out.
not private mortgage
They don't go
companies.
out.
They're not.
They're a government-sponsored entity, basically with government guarantees. They're owned by the government now,
Right.
and they were taken over. And these big government groups do not have to serve us. And the main point I'm making, and I'd like to leave you with tonight, is the bigs.
Wait, you're leaving?
The bigs. I've about had enough. No,
this is good, but isn't this good conversation? No, this is what it should be about.
No,
two guys
that's why I
love each other.
That's right. Heart in the same place.
And hearts are in the same place, and want to have a conversation because their worldview is so.
I'll tell you
different.
this from watching it from the inside.
Yeah.
Bigs help the bigs. Big cronies, big unions, big corporations, big banks. When we're reforming health care, it was not for the little guy. The people writing the bills were the big insurance companies.
But you champion ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. You champion them, and they absolutely are Pfizer, Exxon. They represent all the big guys, and they go into these local communities and they write legislation like derailing minimum wage, like Stand Your Ground, and they just place them in whole hog into these state legislators, and that's one of the groups you champion. Isn't that the height of this kind of bigs helping bigs and cronyism?
Well, they may have some big sponsors, but they work with local legislators on issues that affect the states, and they're one group without any real power. They don't have any authority. And what happens there... They don't have any authority.
You're telling me a group made up of Pfizer, Exxon, all these gigantic corporations...
You're talking about some sponsors of the group, right? You're not talking about the group itself.
The people on the advisory council.
There are lots of companies on it, and ALEC's not a company I'm that involved with, but they're a company or an organization that helps with state-level issues, I guess similar to the way we do at the national level.
They are an advocacy group for more libertarian free market principles that goes into and rewrites legislation that many people view as doing damage to workers' rights.
I don't. You're talking about freedom in the workplace, like they've did in Michigan, and
minimum wage acts, and all kinds of other things that they go in. I mean, I don't think that I'm espousing a view that is not necessarily known.
They generally support pro-growth, opportunity-creating ideas, and of course we can debate their philosophy. But
can we do that next time?
Yeah, we can do that next.
This is fun, though, right? This is enjoyable.
Well, it is enjoyable.
It is because when we walk out of this, I think I will understand a little bit better of where you're coming from, and you will just feel sad.
Yeah. I'll go have some seafood.
Come on. Exactly. When is this debate? When are we going to have a real debate about this and not just a talking point fest? When is that? Because you say government's not accountable, but they are. Elections are accountability. The free market is accountable to market forces, but our government is accountable to us. It is why I believe it is still an effective tool, because it is the only thing that we have that we, the people, can actually make changes in. I can't make changes to Pfizer or Exxon or any of those companies because I'm not a big enough shareholder in those. But this country, I can. And that's why I think to demonize that or to make government the problem is to abdicate our own responsibilities for reforming it.
Well, I think it's abdicating your responsibility if you don't recognize where they are the problem. And
no question.
They certainly are.
Yes.
And one of the things I'm trying to show people is there's so much misdirection and deception and pretense in what goes on in Congress.
Do not disagree.
It's hard for voters to know what's really going on. And,
true.
Just like the debt limit thing that just went through. There was a big controversy because Ted Cruz made them go through the regular process. But it was the same whispers that go on, hey, if you help us get this perch to pass, you won't have to vote for the final thing. So you help us pass it, but it can look like it. And that goes on all the time. And
when's he coming on? Do you know Cruz? When's he coming on? Because he would hate this.
Oh, he would. He
would love this.
You and he. I guarantee. The way he's presented the media is totally different. He's a great guy. He's smart, and he's not afraid of the people in Washington.
Well, let's have him on to have a lovely conversation. I think that would be
Well,
nice.
I'm not his manager, but I'll.
No. Well, the book it is interesting, and I do appreciate you coming by, have a conversation, because you certainly don't have to.
Yeah, well,
and so I
appreciate the
this is an
chance.
elective course, and I appreciate you coming by.
Well, a lot of people get their news here, John, and
That's
you've got a large
the saddest
audience.
thing I've ever heard in my life.
I know it.
Well, they won't for long. Falling in love with America again. Maybe if America just met us at the door wearing nothing but saran wrap. It's on the bookshelves now, Jim DeMint.